All right. Hello. We are live from our respective corners of the earth. I am so pleased to introduce Jeff and Meg for this reading today. My name is Karen Schubert. I'm the director of Lit Youngstown. And I'm just so excited about this reading. So let me tell you who's here. Jeff Friedman, in alphabetical order. Jeff Friedman is the author of 8 previous collections of poems, prose poems, and micros, including The Marksman, Floating Tales, and Presenters. Friedman's work has appeared in American Poetry Review, Poetry, New England Review, Poetry International, Cast Iron Airplanes That Can Actually Fly, commentaries from 80 American poets on their prose poetry, 101 Jewish Poets of the Third Millennium, Flash Fiction Funny, Flash Nonfiction Funny, Fiction International, and the New Republic, and Best Microfiction 2021 and 2022. He has received numerous awards, including a National Endowment Literature Translation Fellowship in 2016, and 2 individual artist grants from New Hampshire Arts Council. Meg Pokrass is the award-winning author of 8 flash fiction collections and 2 flash novellas, including Spinning to Mars and The Lost Detector. Her work has appeared in over 900 literary journals and has been anthologized in 3 Norton anthologies, Flash Fiction International, New Micro, Exceptionally Short Fiction, and Flash Fiction America. She is the series co-editor of Best Microfiction and founding editor of New Flash Fiction Review. Meg lives in Inverness, Scotland, and they are going to read from this marvelous collection, The House of Grana, Padano. Welcome, Meg and Jeff.
Thank you so much for your introduction, Karen, and for inviting us to read at Lit Youngstown again. We'll talk a little bit more about what that's meant to us later. But in the meantime, Meg and I are going to read pieces from the new book, House of Grana Padano, which was recently published by Pokrass. And the book is available through the press, obviously, through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, through the Norwich Bookstore, where we'll be reading on Tuesday at 7 p.m. on Zoom, through Still North Books and many other bookstores and venues. The book was almost entirely co-written, both our voices present in nearly every piece. The House of Grana Padano is divided into 7 sections. We'll read pieces from each section. Starting with the first section, The Sales Force, that's the title of the section. This section came about because we both have sales in the background, in our backgrounds. And we found that out along the way.
Yeah, when Jeff and I first started talking to each other, it quickly became obvious that both of our families were deeply entrenched in the world of sales. My mother was a real estate broker, and Jeff's parents both were in sales. And then Jeff and I, in our 20s and 30s, had awful sales jobs that we pretty much hated. But, you know, I was actually kind of good at mine, which created a lot of strange guilt because I was too good at him. I don't know about Jeff, but anyway, we both had a lot of sales history. So we realized that writing about sales jobs might be a lot of fun. And that became one of our sections.
Yeah, so I actually, I set a record for negative sales, I think, during that time period. You were over.
I was winning all the sales awards and feeling guilty. Yes.
Yeah. So we even each other out at that point. My mother actually had a dress shop that which she used to like say she sold sexy evening clothes. So anyway, it goes along by back. Both my parents were in sales, and as Meg said, we were both. So I'm going to start out reading a piece called "The Salesman Gets a Suit." My father walks into a clothing store. "Sell me a suit," he says to a thin, bald-headed man. Without even looking, the bald-headed man pulls a blue silk suit off the rack. "This suit is made for you," he says, holding the hanger in his right hand and letting the pants legs drape over his arm. "Just feel it." My father brushes it gently with his fingers as though smoothing out the curls of his own hair. I'm a salesman too, he says. I knew it, the bald-headed man says. I could tell the minute you entered the store. The suit is shiny like the lobby in a posh hotel, shiny like a brand new Cadillac parked in the car dealer's window. My father takes it into the dressing room, and when he comes out, the suit swells with his plump belly. The sleeves of the jacket swallow his hands. The pants legs sweep the floor. He looks short and fat, lost in cloth. This suit makes you look like a whole new man, like someone ready to make a killing, the bald-headed man says, and leads him to the mirror. In the mirror, the suit shapes itself to his body, fits him to a T. In the mirror, he's as graceful as a shadow, as light on his feet as a cool breeze rustling his pants legs. He leans forward as if telling the suit a secret. He smiles, and the suit smiles back. Meg, you take over for the next one.
Okay, I'll read My Mother, the Realtor. Hiding from men like a gorgeous nun, my divorced mother was wedded to her spotless car. She sold houses to newly married couples who were loaded with cash, lucky out-of-town buyers who took in everything she said about real estate in California as though hypnotized by her beautiful but impractical dresses. She drove them from posh neighborhood to posh neighborhood and talked to them about dreams and possibilities, about living in the silks of luxury and standing with their cocktails on the lovely verandas as they leaned toward the hills, talking to them about the exotic birds that fly out of the twilight and change the lives of everyone who sees them. Beautiful people become beautiful by living in these houses, she would say. At home, late in the evening, she'd tell me, the business is drying up. And I learned how to assure her that it wasn't. Learned how to sell her back her own dream that the future was ours.
So the second section we're going to read from is titled, and each of our sections have a title, titled The Circus Comes to Town. And you might think of, as we're reading these, like it's sort of like each section tells its own little novel in a weird way. So the pieces all became sequential somehow. Meg, you're going to read My Circus Grandmother paper.
Right. Okay. My Circus Grandmother. Grandma's air had been sucked out of her days. A few decades retired, the tattoos on her body drooped as if they were looking for water. Her bright purple flowers faded into a mauve cloud. Her dragons looked more like stuffed pets. Her snake swallowed her waist. Once she told me she missed the drunken card game afternoons, missed the rude duck sounds of the clowns. She was angry as a bulldog until her afternoon wine. I was 12 and still felt like a picture on the wall, as if waiting for my life to become a life. The heat of summer days buzzing over my skin, I'd make myself a dry turkey sandwich, flipping through childhood. I know what I want, I told her. I want to be an illustrated lady like you, I said. She shook her head as if I just got the right answer to $1 million question. Monkey face, she told me, the year she contracted cancer. I was broken all my life, but it never made me any less interesting. There was a lump in her gut and it wouldn't stop growing. I held her hand, curled up like a hawk's talon. I told her jokes that I heard on TV. She laughed. You're no stand-up comic, but Grandma loves you, darling. Hallelujah. She had a tattoo of a clown on each of her biceps. I love those clowns, those arms. In the end, the clowns seemed to fall asleep where her muscles used to be. When I cradled her head, her last laugh broke on my cheek.
Good. The next piece we're going to read, I'm going to read, is titled, every circus has this. It's like, goes without saying, a weak man in the circus. The weak man in the circus. Every circus has got one. The weak man in the circus. I live on a diet of air particles and gnats, enough to keep me awake, but not enough to give me the strength to walk outside or even to lift a glass of water to my lips. For if I could do that, I would lose my living. Each day, the boisterous crowd clamors inside my tent, eager to see me attempt my famous feats. I start with hoisting a book, but my skinny arms can't hold it up even for a second, so it falls on the ground. Then I rise slowly with Selena, my lover and assistant, at my side, holding me up as I take a step or two. Next, I might flex my arm to show up my very small hump of a bicep and my bony elbows. Eventually, I lift a piece of paper. As it rises almost to my chest, I give out, and the paper floats toward the crowd. They cheer wildly and throw bills and coins in my direction. I place my fingers around the quarter and act as if I'm going to pocket it, but it's no use. It's too heavy, and it drops, which causes them to pitch even more money at me, knowing that I don't have the strength to spend it. When I pretend to faint, dropping into my cot, my lover signals for the crowd to empty out. When they leave, she collects the money and counts it before locking it away in a trunk. You outdid yourself, honey, she says, even if I didn't. When we make love, it's from a distance. She blows kisses at me with her hand. I catch them with my lips and close my eyes. Oh, sorry. Oh, me, I got to keep this back and forth. You know, sometimes the duo breaks down and we have to silently communicate here. Okay, so the next section is a section we dearly love called Motown and More. We can say that about, we love all of our work, obviously. No, Motown and More. And we both love Motown, which is really how the section came about. But we also love other songs too. So we have other things besides Motown.
Oh, yeah. When we started talking, we both realized how much we love music, and that music was, you know, it had always been one of my main inspirations for my stories. That I'd often write a story sort of inspired by a song. And Jeff and I talked about that, how much we love Motown music, how much we love music in general, and how much we wanted to sort of try to write to it together. So that's sort of how, you know, the Motown section came about.
Yeah, the stories were all, and I had to include Dylan, and we both decided we had to include the associations, Along Comes Mary, just because it popped in our mind at the same time. But we really had a list of things that were competing with all these Motown songs. It was amazing how many we didn't write.
Yeah, it's amazing how many stories we didn't write.
Right, yes. Well, you want to read one of those, Meg? Because okay, well, I'm gonna start with Memories of Motown. Memories of Motown. It makes me sad to think about how my father, the magician, loved to dance with me, how he'd turn me in the living room to Love Is Here, Standing By, or My Girl. I'd stare up at him like he was my Houdini, and he'd lead me right into his own haze of smoke, a cigarette dangling from his lips. He danced with me instead of my sister, danced with me instead of my mom, a slippery grin on his face, oblivious to anything but moving with me to the music. My sister cried until my mom held her, swaying together in the living room, slow dancing to Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, as my father folded me so far into himself that for the rest of my childhood, I disappeared. One little thing I'd like to add in that one is that Love Is Here Standing By, that's a Smokey Robinson song. I'm assuming most of you, everybody would probably know My Girl Is the Temptation, but that one is a lesser known, but a beautiful one. Meg, it's your turn.
So I'm reading Looking for Motown. He stops on every corner and looks up at the signs and buildings with a big smile on his face as if he recognizes it all. We're in Motown, he says. How do you know? I ask, not wanting to disappoint him. He puts his hand behind his ear, trying to catch the sound emerging from the street. Listen, he says, the sidewalks, the streets, the buildings are singing The Way You Do the Things You Do. I'm not sure why they'd be singing that song over Heat Wave or Baby Love, but I nod anyway, even though I can't hear anything but noise and traffic. He pulls me forward and we're running from block to block. It's all Motown, he says. Is it Motown in Detroit? I ask. You don't understand Motown, he says, and takes out his harmonica and begins playing a broken version of Fingertips on a street corner with a sign that says whistle. People passing by chuckle or smile, some snort, and a few toss coins at his feet. I smile and pretend to be grooving to the music, swaying my hips and moving my shoulders rhythmically. Is this what it means to be in love? I wonder. He wipes off his harmonica and sheaths it in his pocket. Motown, he says. It's just the beginning, but for me, it's the end. Now I'm going to be reading a story called Broken Man, which was inspired by a Bob Dylan song, Everything is Broken. Broken man. He and I meet in a cheap hotel room. Broken lamp, broken springs, broken shower. He cocks an eyebrow at me because I've broken my New Year's resolution. He's touching my bad knee, saying he likes my rickety gait. When we make love, the shrink-and fitted sheet pops off the disabled mattress. Figures, I say, but the joke breaks in half. My telephone is ringing like a drunken mother's argument. He is disapproving of the call, does not believe in phone calls or mothers. Never needed no mother in prison, he tells me. I feel sorry for him and all of his interrupted stories. He looks at me as if he's wearing a choke collar. Choke collars never teach a dog anything, I tell myself.
Thanks, Meg. I'm going to read Along Comes Mary, the association piece. And actually, this is sort of based on the structure of the song as well. Along comes Mary, like a sweet smell in the air, a pink vapor. Along comes Mary with her bushel of hair and her eyes that have ransacked your cities before. She knocks on your door and your door is gone. She enters your house and there is no house. Along comes Mary, slipping off your mask, kissing you so hard your lips bruise, slipping her tongue into your mouth until you are breathing only her breath. With her silky hand, she touches you so gently, it's like a punch in the gut. With her breathy voice, she lights your candles and puts them out. Along comes Mary like a wind swirling the debris, like the sun shining through your ruins, like the sky enclosing you in its blue wings. The next section that we're working on, or that we did, and we're going to read from, is called Messing with Love. And I think we really had a lot of messing with love pieces.
Yeah.
It was actually really messy love, but we decided to call it Messing with Love. You know, that was a better one to go with. Meg, you go first.
Okay, I'll read a story called Pet Loss. I actually, this story was inspired by the fact a real pet I had. It was a bearded dragon lizard named Hubert. Hubert the bearded dragon. Pet loss. Since Hubert the bearded dragon died, the thing that cheered me up was having sex with my diner customers. The first one was Taylor, middle-aged, married, and polyamorous, hugged like a boa constrictor. Pet loss is so hard, he'd say, squeezing me like a pinky mouse, making me feel like I was alive again. After one of our lovemaking sessions, he ended up in the hospital with heart failure. I visited him there, thinking that Hubert would have liked the unnatural warmth of the hospital room. His wife, Alexis, was by his bedside. I usually see you in your diner outfit, she said. She gave me a lift home in her Honda. He'll be fine, she said, thinking that I was worried about her husband. I invited her into my apartment. That was Hubert's terrarium, I said, pointing to a cluttered corner of the room. I still had his UV light plugged in. She stared at the pet loss support group flyers and hugged me as hard as her husband did. Losing a pet is like losing a dream, she said, moving in to kiss me. After Taylor and Alexis, there was Charlene, who owned the critter center and wanted to harvest my eggs. I can imagine my babies hatching in an incubator, but not in another woman's belly. You and I would make beautiful creatures, she said at the end of my shift, kissing me with the most beautiful scaly lips. Then it was Fernando, a retired bullfighter with scars all over his body. I asked him if he'd like to meet me after work to accompany me to the critter center and help me choose one of the baby iguanas. That one looks a little bit like you, he said, pointing to a wise-looking, buggy-eyed lizard. Afterward, making love with me on my alligator patterned rug, he promised me his couch in Spain whenever I wanted to travel there. I've never been to Spain, I said. Can I bring the iguana? He said, why not? And left me with a case of herpes and the promise of a climate so warm that a reptile wouldn't even need a UV bulb to stay alive. Then there was Elia, who sat at the counter and waited for me to arrive every day. I take you home, he would say, and I make you happy. In the corner of his apartment, he had an aquarium with only one fish. Where are the other fish? I asked. I had a piranha, he said. He ate all the others. I stared at the fish, who looked lonely and useless, like a castaway who had lost the will to float. Elia removed my jacket and kissed me sweetly on the lips. I can be your prince, he said, his big Russian eyes full of soulfulness. Be my frog instead, I said. He squatted down on all fours and croaked.
So one thing that's fun about listening to the reading or thinking about this is because I can sort of hear the back and forth that we're having during each story, you know, like the lines back and forth. And this one started in a most interesting way. Like Meg liked the story that I had done. And so she wanted to take a crack at doing a version of my story. And then she did it. And then I jumped in and started working on the version of me that she had done. And then she started responding. And then we got all the version of each other. And that's what came together inside.
Yeah.
In addition to your inspiration of the pet loss, so
of the actual bearded dragon, yes.
Yeah. In addition, but it's funny because I just think back and forth like how the lines came flying back and forth between the two of us on these. The next one I'm going to read is a piece called "What You Can't Fix," okay, nothing more to say about that one. I've opened my mouth too much already. I can tell. What you can't fix. She was always fixing me, stuffing filler in my holes, applying putty or crazy glue to seal off any cracks to be sure nothing got in. She would pace in front of me as if I were a sculpture, looking at me and thinking, and then she would release herself, satisfied for the moment that the holes were gone and that I was becoming something beautiful and solid. Still, there were holes in my mind she couldn't fix, holes where the light got in, and sometimes snow and rain, holes where my thoughts escaped when they had to. But when she put on her blue satin kimono and hovered near me, I could forgive her. When we made love, it was like hearing the rain beat on the roof, knowing it will not get in. The next section is called the Curse of the Family. And, you know, well, you could look at the family as being a blessing too, but there's a way in which it can be a curse as well. And I feel in this section, it's, didn't we sort of like both of our like it's our families, both for better and worse, both ended up in the stories together. Like biographies.
All of our sisters ended up in pieces, and and our fathers, a lot of stuff about both of our fathers, really.
Yeah, it was kind of fun stuffing your family and my family together.
Yeah.
And making one bad family.
It was therapeutic.
It worked out. And there was a good side to it too. we could emphasize the good traits as well. Anyway, I think my sister might be out there somewhere, so I want to make sure she heard that. Okay. My sisters. All right. So I'm going to read Family Sorcerer, which is one of those combo pieces of both of our families. Under the evening star of the winter solstice, I persuaded an evil sorcerer into undoing the curse on my family. One brother escaped the sticky web of indecision in which he'd been caught like a fly since college. He stood there beaming at me with his contagious smile. The other brother pushed away the boulder that had crushed his legs in middle age and leaped up like a gymnast and told us about his exciting escape. Then, after years, my mother flew up out of the ashes. "You're all such successes," she chirped. We held hands and laughed. And one of the brothers told the old family joke about cousin Mildred, who fell in the bathtub, her head cracking open like a watermelon. And then Mildred became a concert pianist, my mother reminded us. Before the fall in the bathtub, she could hardly play Three Blind Mice. We toasted cousin Mildred and second chances. One of my brothers did a funny impression of our father, who had run off to Hollywood when we were little to become an actor. Remember his bad Fred McMurray impression, my brother said? It was amazing to be back together like this, but something was bothering me. The evil sorcerer kept quiet, but I could feel him brooding. I could see something foreboding in his large brown eyes. "I'm worried," I said to the sorcerer, pulling him aside. I noticed that the sorcerer's hat was frayed around the edges, and then for a moment his face changed. It was our father. "Dad," I said, staring into the patched elbows of his sweater. "Shh," he said, his skin as wrinkled as the milk skim on an old cup of burnt coffee. "Only you can see me as I am. Don't tell them," he said. "It's him," I shouted. Immediately, my siblings began arguing, their faces cracking with anger. My mother confronted her husband. "What did you do to us?" she demanded to know. "I brought you together," he said, "then and now. You ruined us," she said. And then, before our mother could punch him, The sorcerer disappeared. A cold wind blew through the room as she dissolved into a swirl of ashes. For a moment, my brothers stopped fighting and stared into the small tornado that was our mother. Then the first evening star blinked out, and the blanket of tiny, indifferent stars spread over the sky like a net.
I'm going to be reading Fatherless Daughters. In springtime, abandoned daughters burst like myopic butterflies with binoculars attached to their faces while they try to identify their absent fathers who zip through the clouds like geese, but they're not geese and they have no sense of direction. Can you see me down here, Dad? One abandoned daughter trills, while one father zigzags ever closer to the sun. It's hurting my eyes, he yells, waving his pale wings like flags. Another abandoned daughter spots a cloud in the shape of her father and flies through him again and again. He wasn't much of a father, she says. He's better as a cloud. Another daughter shouts, heads up, as her father falls from the sky headlong into the crowd of abandoned daughters. The other fathers cringe and avoid looking down. They're out to get us, they say. They want our money or hugs or something. The daughters, tired of treading air, fling themselves toward their fathers, eager to bring one home, even if he's someone else's father, even if he never earns another dime, even if he sheds all of his feathers. But the fathers prove elusive, no longer really fathers.
And the next section, Meg's going to introduce.
The next section is our title section, The House of Grana Padano, and it's based on the idea of a love triangle that never quite evolves. Jeff and I write quite a bit about messy love, as Jeff said earlier, and what better than a fairy tale-like kind of hypothetical situation in which an ex-partner moves to the tiny village in which her former husband and his new wife are thriving with no explanation.
Well, so I would just want to add that it's not just the story of these three people. It's also the story of three cheeses, Grana Padano, Parmesan, and Pecorino. So that's an important thing in this section.
The mysterious ex-wife character in these stories keeps popping up uninvited, and she lives in a house made of Grana Padano cheese. And the house is mostly invisible to the human eye. The only way to find it is by a sense of smell or taste. And, you know, we really had too much fun working with various constraint exercises on this section to get the stories rolling. We'd use the same characters and situations, and we'd write them using different points of view, grammatical structures, various sort of really fun, weird constraint challenges. We turned it into a game, so it really felt like playing. So I'll read the first one from the section that we're reading tonight called The Smell of the Ex. My husband's ex smells like Hawaiian flowers. She moved to our village only a short while ago, but I see her all over town, local men trailing behind her. Whenever I say anything about it, my husband says I am obsessed. What ridiculous assertion, I say. Maybe you're obsessed, I wink, trying to reduce the tension. But the truth is, his ex smells so damn wonderful. And when she passes by me on the way to the grocery store, I can't help but follow just to inhale her. I've started to feel like her happy little homeless dog. Remind me why she moved here again, I ask. He doesn't answer, but begins sniffing all around the living room. Do you smell Grana Padano somewhere in the living room, he asks. What are you talking about, I reply. I'm going out for avocados. I close my eyes and I head for the grocery store as if blind. But everywhere I go, I smell Hawaiian flowers.
Okay, and so the next one that I'm going to read is called Mistaking One Cheese for Another. She said her house was Grana Padano, but it was really Pecorino. I'm not a snob or anything about cheeses, but who goes around boasting about her house being made of cheese and then gets it wrong? It's hard to know what to say to her. So I sniff around her house at night when she's sleeping and pinch the corners. It crumbles into my palm. Pecorino, I say to myself, and take a plastic container home for my husband to sample. Yes, he says, Pecorino. Only my ex would mistake Pecorino Romano for Grana Padano. But then again, her pasta was always mushy, and not even a good Pecorino can help that. He tastes the cheese again and licks his lips. Now he's eating the cheese and saying that it's got a wonderful flavor. And I can only imagine that the flavor reminds him of her, salty and buttery, like some kind of sheep mulling through the grasses, its body full of corals. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Meg. You take over.
Next piece is like we wrote it in dialogue, so it's just a dialogue piece between the husband and the wife, and it's kind of written like a little tiny theater piece. So it's just the dialogue between the husband and the wife about the ex.
It's called Didn't We See Her?
It's called Didn't We See Her? Why did she move here?
Did she actually move here? And how do we know she moved here?
How do we know she didn't? Didn't we see her again today?
Did we? If we did see her, how do we know it was really her?
Well, who else dresses like her in this town? Who else wears that long blue dress?
You're asking me who else dresses like her? Have I ever seen her in a long blue dress?
Didn't we see her today? And wasn't she wearing a long blue dress?
Was it even blue or was it turquoise? And was that her in the dress?
Who else would it be? Who else would weave up and down the block, swaying her ass like a duck, shaking water out of its tail feathers? Who else would walk around town with a wedge of Grana Padano in her hands?
Was that Grana Padano or Parmesan? Are you saying she's nutty?
Are you saying she isn't?
Why do you think you keep seeing her?
Why do you think you don't see her?
Isn't this conversation embarrassing?
Why would I be embarrassed? And what is wrong with this conversation?
Who said anything was wrong? That's a duet. Or duo or something. All right, so Meg, I think we're going to read the last section of the book is titled Cognac Dream, and you can imagine how that started. You do Sneaker Dream, and I'll do a salesman piece of it.
Right. So the next story is called Sneaker Wave. It's about the Wiki-Wachi mermaid competition. Each day, she was more like a mermaid, sitting near the windowsill, waiting for the Wiki-Wachi men. Distrusting the sea, her mother was surprised, worried that her daughter had a mermaid calling. But she looked at her mother's coffee table, strewn with chemotherapy, survival packets, and old women's magazines, never a word about a fin or a tail. Don't be snide, she muttered at her mother under her sea breath. Since her mother got sick, she kept the mean words to herself. The Wiki-Wachi uncles, a middle-aged carload, would be here any minute to take her to her inauguration. And Tammy, a blonde pole dancer, last year's mermaid, would hand her the trophy and pose with her next to the pedestal. The sounds of the sea had followed her the day she walked into their lodge, when she felt how sick she was as a human. She floated into the meeting, water coming down from her eyes as her fins moved around. Then one of the uncles came over and propped her up. She was just the right size and had miraculously landed on their beach. Now that was a sneaker wave, he said. She was done with being part of the herd, an ordinary high school girl. Her uncles brought her glasses of cucumber water and poured it over their own heads just to make her laugh. They're sincere, Mom, she said with pooling eyes. She tried not to worry about the human cancer stalking her mother. Instead, she dreamed about crawling into a shell, living there quietly, while the big changes happened around her. Inside the shell, she would glow from the inside out, drinking seawater slowly, looking back at the ways she might have easily drowned.
Great. Okay, so I'm gonna go back and read another salesman piece called Something Special. And do we have time to read a few more pieces, or we're thinking like 3 more pieces, including this one? Good. Something Special. After returning from a 2-week sales trip one Friday evening, my father swept through the door like a gust of leaves and dust, a wind blowing through the rooms of our apartment. He heaved his suitcases onto his bed and unloaded his samples first, hanging them in the closet, and then his wilted shirts and pants. Don't make a mess, my mother said. Too late. He always made a mess. Debris was scattered on the floor, and she began sweeping around him with a broom she kept handy in their bedroom closet. Out of the suitcase, my father lifted a tiny bronze-colored roulette wheel. I bought this for you, he said. It's one of a kind. It looked like something that might have come from a Cracker Jack box. I stared at it for a moment, and then he placed it in my hand. Don't break it. He had promised to bring home something really special, an early Hanukkah gift. I didn't hide my disappointment. He laughed. Here's your real gift. From his pocket, he plucked a shiny coin, larger than a quarter. Do you know what this is? He asked. A Kennedy $50, I answered. I reached for it, knowing I could buy 10 packs of baseball cards or 10 Nestle's Crunches with it, but he closed his palm on the coin. Not so fast. I'll keep it for you, he said. Someday it'll be worth something. End of her blue period.
This story is called The End of Her Blue Period. When she picks up Blue Man from dance rehearsal, she invites him to stay and offers him supper. I'll pop over to Safeway for Red, he says. When he returns, he's holding a bottle of wine without a label and some blue irises that have probably been stolen from someone's garden. Here, you take these, he says, and I'll put on some music. And it's just at that moment she realizes that his blue eyes are not really blue, and his wan face reminds her of cold oatmeal. Still, the room brightens from his irises. She lives in a gray apartment building sandwiched between two smelly parking lots. She painted her walls off-white, but the off-white is turned grayish, and the smoke and fumes coming in the windows from the parking lots. She would keep them shut, but her stuffy apartment needs air to circulate. As always in the evening after dinner, Blue Man streams the blues, closing his eyes and singing the words to You Put a Spell on Me. And now she's no longer sure what's going to come next. I might even love you, she whispers to Blue Man while he sleeps, his hair nesting in the hollow of her rose-colored pillowcase. She says it to the back of his unconscious head, lips dangerously close to his ear. You're part of my blue period. And then it's not a dream anymore. One day she wakes up and finds her feelings can be painted blue. When she tells him goodbye, she memorizes the pinkness of his skin under the blue.
Right. So I'm going to end on a lighter note, a piece called Picking Up the Moose. And by the way, this was almost the title of the book, but we decided not to because we didn't want to have a picture of somebody picking up a moose on the front cover. Might have been the reason. Anyway, Picking Up the Moose. At a party, I met a moose who was dating a bear. A drink in his paw, the bear was in the corner with a pretty cat with bright violet eyes. What's with these animals, I wondered. The bear looked a little sleazy, but the moose was really very attractive with big eyes and a prominent nose. She was wearing some kind of strong perfume that attracted and repulsed me. It looks as though your bear has found a cat, I said. She snorted. I took that as a sign she agreed. What do you say we go home together, I asked. I don't date dogs, she said. That seems a little inflexible, I replied. She kicked the ground several times with her hooves. Does that mean she wants to dance, or is that dancing for a moose? My girl was playing, and all the other animals were slow dancing. When she pulled away from me, I barked several times. That got me a lot of nasty looks, but not from the moose, who faced me again. Forget the bear, I said. I took off my mask. I'm not a dog, I said. Well, what are you then, she said. She took off her mask, and she was still a moose. I saw the bear outside the window chasing the cat up a tree. The moose began shifting her weight back and forth on her long legs, and pretty soon we were dancing cheek to cheek. No, kind of fun little party with a moose in the. We've been living out here in New Hampshire woods for too long.
So that's the end of our reading section of the, yeah.
So if there are any questions.
Oh, I loved it so much. And
Thanks, Karen.
a lot of enthusiastic comments from those who are watching live. I just thank you all for joining us. And I'm going to ask a few questions. I have so many questions, and I look forward to our conversation. And if any of you out in live land would like to ask a question, I think I'm just tech savvy enough to read it, and I'll really try. So I want to start with about a question of place. I know that Meg lives in the UK. First of all, I want Meg to say something about whether or not she has found the Be Loud Glade. And also I know that Jeff lives in New Hampshire. And so I think you've known each other for a short time. I'd love to hear that story about how you met and how you're collaborating on this wonderful collection.
So, Meg, do you want
Well,
to start?
yeah, but I'm embarrassed to say I haven't found the Be Loud Glade yet, but I'm looking forward to finding it in the future. I actually just moved to Scotland 2 months ago, so it's very new for me. But yeah, so Jeff and I met through Lit Youngstown because we were both asked to be in a previous reading. Was it about 2 years ago?
Yeah.
With Denise Duhamel. And we were in it, you know, together, all three of us, and Jeff and I were emailing our books to each other. Ended up it was during the pandemic, and we ended up just sort of sharing you know, a few things about what we were going through. And then all of a sudden we realized we had wanted to talk more. And I don't know, it was like after the reading, we just kept emailing each other. And then I was a big fan of Jeff's work. And I had just read his book, The Marksman, and was completely enthralled with it. I just thought it was absolutely brilliant. And it was so exciting to talk to Jeff. Plus it was a very lonely and isolating time. So to connect with another writer then was extremely meaningful. And especially with Jeff is so funny and warm, and it was just great. And we just hit it off. So, and I, you know, so that's my part of the story.
Well,
anyway.
thank you, Meg. It's been wonderful working with you, and I was a big fan of your work before we even read. So I was really happy that Karen had put us together, and you were the matchmaker on this, actually, Karen, because you remember the way your series works is, you know, we had three people with Denise, Meg, and I were reading, and you encouraged us to get together and ask each other questions. So we emailed each other back and forth. Denise was part of that. And then Meg asked me, I think it emailed me a question one time, and then I answered back, and then she emailed me again, and then I emailed her. And that began a really long series of emails that happened every day. I think we emailed every day for a year, but we started Zooming shortly thereafter. Every Tuesday we would Zoom. And I think we were just laughing so much that we were having such a good time. We started writing together, and then I think you proposed to me first. You asked me if we wanted to write a book together.
I asked if you were interested in a book project.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it when you said yes. I was so excited. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was really fun. It was just really so much. We were having so much fun together. That's how it all really came about, I think, you know, and I was really a big fan of her work before. So like I said, I was really happy. I'd followed her work for a long time, and she had also published me in her magazine.
And I published your work numerous times in New Flash Fiction Review, which is the magazine I founded in 2014. So it was amazing to actually talk to you. It was great.
So I mean, that's how it sort of happened. So it started at Lit Youngstown. So we're really glad you're having us on again, you know.
You were the catalyst for sure, Karen. You know, thank you. It really has made my life much happier. Just collaborating with Jeff has been such a boost for me. It's been so much fun.
And also your series has been great too. I mean, this is wonderful.
It is.
On YouTube. I remember the first time I saw, I think it was Michael and two other, I forget the names, the two women who read with him, Michael Waters, and that was a wonderful reading. That you know, you have so many wonderful readings on the website. So,
oh, thank you. You know, I love the idea that that's how you came together, but also that you found joy in this crushingly sad and stressful time. I think that's really wonderful. The readings, we were so fortunate to have people ask us to be included, and it wasn't 100% random that I matched people together into the readings, maybe only 98%. So I'm really glad that it worked out so beautifully for the two of you. That's super great.
Yeah, you know what I should mention though, you know, you and I were in a writing group for a little while too.
Mm-hmm.
That was really fun.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm. It's really cool. So can you talk to us a little bit more about the specifics, like the actual practical methods you use to write the book?
Well, okay, so it was a little bit of a moving target. So we had a number of methods we used, but I think it really began with Meg and I sort of doing versions of each other. And that's before we even knew that we were going to be doing a book. we just started doing some versions
Yeah,
of each other.
we used each other as sort of as a way to find writing prompts to feel
Yeah.
kind of inspired, because it was a really dull time. Just we weren't
Right.
going there, and so it was like, oh wow, can I play with one of your stories and
Yeah.
use my voice and try to mirror it? And Jeff was like, hey, that sounds great, and I'll do one with yours. And so we
Yeah.
started kind of doing mirroring each other.
Yeah, you
each
were
other's
taking
work
things
and stories that we loved. Yeah.
from floating to, I was going into your spinning from Mars, and like,
And I was working with Bear Fight, your famous story, Bear Fight, and trying, and that, yeah.
right.
So,
And so we had that was at the beginning, and then I mean, we went through all sorts of things, because we did the back and forth, like the sort of modified Exquisite Corpse. It was never purely like a Exquisite Corpse. It would be like we would be more like 2 and 3 lines, and then keep going if you feel like it,
right.
And I think also we did yeah. I mean, you like the doing the beginnings, and I would do.
Yeah, I'm really good at sort of beginning stories, and I for a while I just felt like all I could write was beginnings, and then Jeff would come up with these brilliant endings, and then we kind of weave things we'd go back into the center and kind of co-write the center. And so I was sending you a lot of beginnings, you were sending me endings, and then we changed the center. It was just kind of this mishmash of stuff.
Yeah, and eventually ended up being, I mean, I'm just, this whole thing about us working together was funny, because I could see, sometimes I would take the female character and write the dialogue or do something, and sometimes she would take the male.
That was fun.
We weren't tapped into any, it was just like, well, let's see what else we're going to say here, and
we tried all kinds of stuff. Like we just, part of the fun of it was coming up with new ways to approach it. So
remember, we did backwards ones for a while. We tried the backwards stories, like starting from the ending and going to the front, and then and then skip. I mean, we did all sorts of formal concerns. So we just kept doing things back and forth, but it let us sort of back and forth with each other each time. I mean, and once you get a draft, then we would keep working on it together. So
at what point we were emailing each other new stories like a couple times a day. So at our sort of high point, we were writing 2 or 3 stories a day. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, because I was teaching full. It's funny. I was teaching this should not get out there, but I was teaching on Zoom, and I would do an exercise with my class and put them off silent where they'd be writing, and then I'd go back to Meg. And I would sort of start writing on the piece that she had sent me and work on that. Then I'd go back to them and go, I think you need to get some criticism. I'm going to put you on breakout rooms. And I put them in breakout rooms, go back to our piece. And this went on all day. They're kind of retired now, so nobody can catch me. I don't know.
Yeah. But we couldn't keep up that frantic pace, that we couldn't sustain that. But it's,
we kept thinking the book, the book would get to a point, we wrote a lot of pieces, but and then we got him go, well, the book is almost over. And then all of a sudden an idea would come up, like a salesman piece, let's say. Like I remember this was particular because we actually wrote that later. Like Meg said, let's write something about salespeople. So we both write and go, God, we like these. Okay. So we keep writing the sales pieces, We ended
up with a lot of stories that didn't actually make it into the manuscript. I'd say we ended up with almost twice as many, and we culled it down to the pieces that belong together and our favorite pieces and so forth.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, there were really a lot that didn't get in that we were thinking of using it at a different time. So
So this is really in-depth, complex level of collaboration. It's so interesting hearing you talk about the project. And I know, Jeff, when we were in the writing group, I know it changed the way I saw or processed my own writing, thinking about all of you reading it. Like I projected how you would respond, right? And do you feel like it changed the way you were writing as you were in the project?
Oh yeah, I think for sure. I think the thing is, at the bottom of this, Meg and I, it did. Like we never said no to each other. That was the thing. Mm-hmm. She would write something and I would go, Well, whenever I thought of it, I never entered into it. I would just keep going, and she would keep going. So she never said, "Oh, that's a really bad line," or that we should get rid of
But
that.
yeah. We kind of use this the theory of improvisational acting, which is yes is much more powerful and much more creative than no. So the idea is that just keep going with it, whatever it is, no matter how weird or how crazy or how unintuitive, and it becomes something. Whereas you block the energy and you say no to it, and the piece sort of dies. So that's what we were finding ourselves doing.
I think that somewhere in the back of my mind, there's a Meg in there, and I'm working. There's
that way too. And I do feel like working with Jeff has changed my writing. I mean, not changed it, but I have a different sensibility sometimes in my head that I can pull out. It's kind of like it's there, and if I want it, I can see it through Jeff's eyes. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I think there was we've talked about it. This actually doesn't hold up that well, but we sort of talked about it. Her, she writes these stories that are very lyrical and poetic, and I tend to really come at it from the prose poem side, with prose poems that are very narrative at times.
Right.
And we sort of moved that towards each other and back and forth, and we sort of went, you know what I mean? So we crossed over in all sorts of ways that way.
We're very, very different actually as writers, and there are ways that we cross over.
That's a top, I did write a lot of love poems at different times, but you write a lot of messy love stories. I really had a great time all of a sudden writing messy love stories.
Yeah, conflict, my middle name.
Yeah.
Or mess, or just mess,
So there was a lot. I think both of us gave a lot to each other that way. I mean, in terms of writing,
Absolutely. Yeah. Because a lot of your love stories are a lot happier. And I think we ended up writing some happy ones too.
Are they happier? I didn't know that.
I think they are.
They usually end up with like 50 quarters going up in the air and staying there.
Some of them are happier.
I like the way you qualified that. Some of them are happier. Yeah. Anyway, What do you have other questions you want to ask?
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit? You mentioned that you were different writers. Can you talk a little bit about that? How you're different?
Sure.
Well, I tend to write more fiction, flash fiction with a slight, sort of poetic sensibility. Because I wrote poetry a long while ago, but I kind of stopped writing poetry when I started writing flash in 2008. And so, the poetry isn't there, but it's not an active part of what I write. And Jeff is he writes as much prose poetry as fiction, or more prose poetry. It's known for prose poetry. And microfiction, which it's kind of weird because all these are hybrid sort of forms, and like you don't want to slap a label on anything, but anyway, I think I tend to come more from story, I guess, and Jeff comes more from poetry, but has a lot of story in it, narrative in it, something like that. I think
that's right. I tended to, I think for doing a lot of these, even though a lot of it's in there, like I tend to go towards parallelism and anaphora a lot. So there is a lot of that in there, but I pulled away from that in many pieces because for the good of the stories, we were focused on really micros, although many of these have a kind of poetic, you could look at them as prose poems. Like I said, those distinctions, there's there's a blur in there, but I tended to move away towards fulfilling the story and impulse more in these, I think. So, I mean, we agreed on that, the kind of fabulous micro.
Yeah.
Cool. So Jenny wants you to know that the Pujols got 2 homers.
Oh, yeah. Good. St. Louis Cardinals.
I don't know what that means, but I'm glad. So I noticed that animals play a large part in most of if not all of the pieces. What is it about dogs and cats that made including them essential throughout the book? And let's not forget the bearded lizard.
Yeah.
I don't even notice that animals are in crawling into my stories. They all of a sudden they're in there, and I'm like, it happened again. It's like when I'm writing my first drafts, animals just literally sneak in, and they represent different things in different stories. But I think ultimately they represent vulnerability. And they're very changeable. They can change, animals can change the energy in a relationship or in a moment. And so they're a great catalyst in stories. I just love having them in stories, even if it's an insect or, a bird. It's just something very special about having a live creature come into it and mess around with things.
Well, I think that's true for me too. I mean, I'm allergic to cats, but I've really been involved with animals. My dogs, my dog Ruby, every second I'm around, I've spent a lot of time with all my dogs. But also, I think the other thing is I have a pretty broad background in fable and tale. So I'm always reading fables and tales. And I just think that there's both a lot of seriousness in the way you can make the way an animal speaks, and also a lot of humor too. So I like the sort of fable thing, like the small fable by Kafka, like those kind of pieces. I kind of really love them, and so I was influenced by a lot of that. So I get a lot of animals in my pieces as a result of writing. Reading a lot of fables and liking to write that, and also fable, you can be fabulistic and still not even have an animal in it, but a fable-like piece. So I really, I shoot for that a lot. And so I not only have them in as real characters, I also have them in as sort of fable-like characters, to do. Like Picking Up the Moose would be an example of something we both did, and it came off and morphed through a piece that Meg and I did that was started to morph off another piece that I had done. And they're in all those pieces, the animals are speaking and they're having their say, so that's, I think, I think they're, for both of us, are really important in the pieces, and maybe unconscious as well.
Right.
That's cool. So I have one more question. I would like you to talk about the title and also this really super cool cover. And I would like to know which one of these houses is made of cheese.
That's pretty funny. Well, so the house of Grana Padano, well, I mean, we came up with, Grana Padano, we were talking about Grana Padano cheese, and I think I was complaining that I actually had this Grana, and I really had a tough time shredding it. We started talking about it, and it got in, and we had Parmesan in there. So it was sort of like the house of Grana Padano just sounded so grand that we had the house of Grana Padano. It sounds like 7 generations of whatever. So I think, didn't it morph out of one of those conversations where we were doing that, Meg?
I think it did, yeah. And then we were writing those cheese fairy tale pieces. Wife, and she lived in a house. It was perfect that she lived in a house of cheese, and yeah, exactly. So.
And and you'll have to be modest about this for a second, because I'm going to brag about you. But the cover came about. We were having this conversation, and we both sort of love Chagall, and we got in this conversation. Meg is like amazing at photoshopping and coming up with images. So when we were doing the House of Grana Padano, at first she came up with this idea, and she photoshopped this wheel of cheese that we were walking out of. And we decided not to use that one. But anyway, so we started talking about Chagall, and I had done a poem a long time ago on Lonnie Versailles, and she had done one on a piece on a different piece. And so we got this conversation going, and Meg said, I'm going to Chagall us. And I go, that's great, let's Chagall us. So she came back with this image of the Chagalling us, and it went through this process of, it was just wonderful to start with, although modifications really did have to be made. And then our editor, Mark Gibbons, who was just wonderful, a great guy and really been supportive all the way, he played with it, but then he found out that we couldn't use it because Russia has a tight control on Chagall. And then I said, well, can't we just, look, we're parodying it anyway, can't we just screw the background and go in a whole other direction, just get a whole new background, make a whole new thing out of it? And that's what and Meg again came back with something new.
Mark Gibbons, our publisher, is really brilliant visually. So he worked with our concept of the Chagalling us, but he turned it into this sort of wonderful tableau of the houses. I don't know which one of those houses is made of cheese. Do you, Jeff?
No, I don't really, because we were just concerned with actually having a cover.
I don't think it's the purple one because
Oh, let me look
mean,
at it.
that would scare me. I don't really think I'd want to eat like purple cheese.
I think it's one in the background, like towards the trees in the back there. I think that's one because that's where that's where the character goes into
to look for the ex-wife.
to look for the ex-wife. I think it's in the back. But you know, like I said, you did a wonderful job of just visualizing what we were talking about. It just, when I saw it, I started laughing, and so did everybody else. And then Mark working with it really did fabulous putting the cover together.
He really, yeah. Kevin's a publisher at Pelicanesis is fantastic. He's so much fun to work with, and he goes. It's like the saying yes thing. He never says no. You know, well, he would say no if it was something really weird, but I mean, he just loves the energy, you know, the creative thing. He's a very creative person himself, and it was really fun.
He was so supportive. It was just, you know, he was just so supportive.
Really so excited about our ideas, and so.
That's so wonderful. Well, bravo to both of you. All best wishes with this book. I will drop a link to the publisher in the chat on YouTube, and
thank you.
Wish you all the best. And I hope that we can bring you into Youngstown for real.
That would be so exciting. God, that would be wonderful. We're going to be in Brattleboro, Vermont, the Brattleboro Lit Festival in October. So
how cool is that?
Yeah.
So that'll be fun. So thanks again. This has been great, Karen.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Karen.
Really my great pleasure. Thank you. Take good care.
You too. Okay. Bye.